Whoa! So, you want to rotary swap your car, but you have no idea how to do it. Well, I got you. This is Samantha. This is my 2017 Toyota 86 with a 13B in it. Now you may be asking yourself, Carl, how the hell did you do it? How much did it cost? Well, I'm gonna tell all of you guys that everything that I've done to get to this point. Okay, so number one, you're gonna need a car. We're not gonna factor in the car to this because I'm assuming that you're doing this with a car, a shell, or whatever. So we're gonna scratch that. So first thing that you're gonna need is, you're gonna need an engine. And you're probably saying to yourself, where can I get an engine from? I don't even know what to look for or anything like that. That's fine. Let's just say you're looking for an engine. You find yourself a spicy REW 13B out of a 93 RX-7 from an importer or from a friend or some guy selling it on Facebook Marketplace. Kind of spooky, but buying one of these engines anyway can be kind of spooky sometimes. Let's just say you get an engine and a trans. You're probably looking at roughly around, let's just take a huge guess here. From the last couple times when I was looking before, I saw, let's just say $8,000, engine and trans. So now you got your engine and trans, and you're gonna need everything else outside of it. Wiring harness, radiator, intercooler piping. If you're going with like a turbo build, a turbo, throttle body if you do drive-by-wire, unless you stick with the cable. So you need the harness, all the wiring, the fuses, the relays, the oil coolers, the transmission, everything. Step two is you're gonna need to find yourself an amazing fabricator. Now me, luckily, I was able to work with Will from Profection Customs and Skeeter, one of his employees, and they are phenomenal. They've honestly become some of my best friends and family to me. So basically, I'm gonna break it down for you how we did this build. So obviously, this engine does not sit in this car factory. There's no bolt-on kits or anything like that. So what we had to do is we actually had to make an engine mount for the engine and the car. Funny enough, it was actually super easy. We were able to get the engine to bolt right up to the stock subframe without having to modify absolutely anything on the car. But on the engine, what we had to modify is we did have to make a custom oil pan. And you're probably asking yourself, well, how the hell did you guys make an oil pan? A lot of twisted T's and a lot of long nights. So let's just say, get an engine mount. This was CNC cut, so you're probably talking, let's just say $500 to $600. Then you're gonna need, depending on the transmission that you go with, there's one other person out there who has done it with a stock 13B transmission, and that kind of works as well. But what I did is I put a CD09 in mine, and I went with Fisch Racing because they have a direct bell housing to 13B swap. So what you do is you cut the bell housing off of the CD09, install the Fisch Racing CD09 bell housing kit, and it bolts right up to the engine. No problems at all. With that kit specifically, you're looking at somewhere around, I think it's not in CAD, but in American or USD, you're looking at about $2,800, but it's a phenomenal kit. Comes with a flywheel, the bell housing, and everything that you're gonna need to install it. So it's basically plug and play, super easy. One other thing that I get asked is, what starter am I running with this car? And I'm running, and I'm proud to say that they sponsored me, is Wosp. Wosp Performance. You've probably heard of them in Rob Dom's videos. You may have heard of them before in like rally racing and other forms of racing. They have amazing starters. It honestly sounds like an F1 car starting the car because it's a great starter. It mounted right up to the bell housing, worked perfectly fine. So if you're looking for a great starter, I would definitely hit up Wosp Performance because they are great. Now, next is modifying the bell housing or the trans tunnel for the bell housing. Now, if you've seen any of my videos, there was a lot of hammering, a lot of cutting, and what we actually ended up doing is we cut out the bell housing and made a plate that fits over it, that's wider for the CD09. That you can do, it's pretty cheap. If anything, what we probably could have done when we thought about it later on is cut the trans housing, the trans tunnel down the middle and split it open and put a plate down on top and then welded that in to make it wider. But it was our first time doing it because no one else has ever done it before. So for all of my engine controls, so coil packs, ECU, wideband, things like that, everything on my setup is Haltech. And honestly, it is the best. It's so easy to use, and especially with someone like me who had to learn all this, like as I'm going through it, the Haltech setup has been the flawless setup for me. I've had a great tuner behind me, Ryan from RGHTBrain Design, Kevin and Ramos, my two other friends that I met at the rotary shop that I used to work at, and that's where I learned all of this, to teach me and kind of make me figure it out on my own as to what I'm doing. So you're going to need an ECU to control what you're going with. I have a Haltech Elite 2500 ECU, along with 4 Haltech smart coils, a Haltech wideband, a Haltech IC7 dash. Let me show you that. So great thing about it is this dash is amazing. So the great thing about this dash is I'm not a fan of having a bunch of gauge pods and all this stuff around. I like to keep it OEM. So if you look, this cluster here, I got this bezeling here from Mako Motorsports in Australia. It was about 250 bucks. It's 3D printed, and it allows this Haltech dash to sit right in there. And with this, I can get oil temp, E85 percentage, coolant temp, coolant pressure, oil temp, my wideband reading, boost pressure, battery voltage. You can even get miles on it, like your OBD or your odometer, your readings for all that. And there's a ton of other things that you can do with the Haltech setup. It is unbelievable, and it is so easy to work with, and it looks good and it works well. So how you're mounting your intercooler and radiator, and again, that's where Will came in. We did a custom V-mount setup for my car. So Will was able to make these brackets for my car, bolts right into the frame, and then we have my intercooler and radiator set up, and they work flawlessly. And then you have to think about all your fabrication for where you're running all your piping, your exhaust, everything like that. So throughout this process, I learned how to weld. I'm not the best at it, I'll admit that now. So Will and Skeeter were the ones who helped me a lot with the fabrication. I was there and part of the process in that sense, but when it came to actually welding things up, it's not something I can do. So Will made my intake piping here, welded it onto my turbo, welded the end tanks on to my intercooler. He also cut and bent this on his plasma table, welded everything up for my radiator. So that's how we have all that. Will also made my turbo manifold. He made my downpipe and my full titanium exhaust. Now, a titanium exhaust is not something that you need for this. This is just something that I wanted. So all in all, for fabrication, because Will also made my transmission mount that mounts in the back, and my transmission actually sits almost in stock location. It's actually about an inch forward of where like a stock shifter would sit, but comes right through the middle, lines up well, and it has a great placement. So that's awesome. All in all, for fabrication, especially since all of this was custom and there was no like blueprints to go off of, I'm gonna take a high guess and say you'd probably be looking at like something where I'm at with what I'm doing. You'd probably be looking at somewhere around the $10,000 range, because he's doing all my exhaust, my intake piping, making my intercooler, welding on my turbo, cutting all these pieces and everything like that. So I'm gonna say, let's just call it even and say it's probably gonna be like $11,000. One thing that I also forgot to mention is, just because you have your engine, you have to decide if you wanna go Bridgeport, semi-peripheral, street port. So you have three ways of porting your engine, basically. So and I'll put pictures up. So you have your Bridgeport, which gives you the braps. You have your semi-P, which gives you your braps. And then you have like your just normal street ports or large street ports that'll give you, it won't give you the braps, but it'll give you a nice tone, but more air intake into the system, which allows you to make more power. We could go in depth into that. There's a lot of things with porting, but you have to figure out what you want to do for porting on your engine and how you want to build it. So let's say you spent 8 on the engine, and now you're going to open it up to port it. Maybe you want to put new seals in it and everything. Let's just say a rebuild is roughly around $4,000, $5,000 for the rebuild and porting, right? So now you've got your porting set up. Let's say you did what I did. I went with a semi-peripheral port. I have 1.25 inch semis on my setup. That is, so you have, at that point, instead of running 4 injectors, you'll run 6. So you have 4 secondaries and then 2 primary injectors, which will give you a total of 6 injectors. I have 6 2150cc injectors, so it's right around 12,000 cc's of fuel. Now what you've got to think about is your harness and all that. So I have a Rywire harness that is the entire setup. Everything was plug and play, made specifically for the engine, and you can actually call Rywire and get them. You can tell them the injector specs that you have, what sensors you're going to run, and all that. I am running Haltech sensors, so I have 3 Haltech fluid pressure sensors. What those sensors will allow me to do is they'll allow me on one sensor for coolant, I can manage pressure and temp. So I can know that all off of one sensor. So I have that for my oil, fuel, and coolant. So instead of having 6 different sensors, I only have 3. And my Rywire harness wired up just for that. Then you have to think about all your other accessories. Obviously, there are some things that I've done here that you don't necessarily need to do. So I don't have AC. I have electric power steering, which we were able to keep because of where the engine mounts. So that's great. So no power, no fluid power steering. Don't have to worry about any squeak or loud noises. They're just nasties, right? So I'm not running AC, don't have power steering, don't have an extra idler, and I don't have the factory water pump. What I actually went with was an electric water pump that's mounted down there. If you've never worked with an electric water pump like me, it was a hell of a time to figure it out, to see where I can mount it and what would make the best amount of sense. Long story short, if you go with an electric water pump, make sure that it is gravity fed so the water falls down on top of it so that it can pump water up so that you don't have air flowing through the system or getting trapped. Trust me, it'll make it a lot easier. Then you have to figure out, right, all your lines. I went with all Vibrant lines, so I have my Vibrant coolant lines going to my turbo, Vibrant lines for oil delivery and oil return, coolant delivery, all down there. All my oil lines, all my fuel lines are Vibrant. I am running FFE fuel rails. I'm running Turbo Smart fuel pressure regulator, 2 Walbral 450 fuel pumps in the rear that are mounted with the, I can't remember Radium Engineering dual fuel hanger. So I have that. I have an ACT CD09 clutch. I think it's the Extreme series, so that one should be able to hold all the power. And then when it comes to holding all the power in your drivetrain, the CD09 ACT clutch. Now I did upgrade my axles. I installed Driveshaft Shop 800 horsepower rated axles, which should not have any issues holding the power that I'm going for with this car. Now the only thing that I have not upgraded is my diff. My diff is very stock. Looking down there, you can see the stock diff all down there. Then I have my Driveshaft Shop axles. I did go with FDF spec lower control arms and toe arms, so I can have full adjustability in the rear. I did somehow acquire some white line bushing inserts, so I threw those in. Not necessarily important, but to give the car a little bit more feel. But yes, stock diff. And then you may be asking yourself, well, Carl, how are you getting the power from the engine to the rear wheels? God, was that spicy. It wasn't super spicy, but it's something that I've never had to experience before, which was getting a custom drive shaft made. Now, a custom drive shaft from Driveshaft Shop is, like, let's just say I got an aluminum one, would have ran me $1,000. I'm quite sure, somewhere around there. I think it was like, when I called them, they said $800 to $1,500. I said, fuck that. And I measured it from center to center. It came out to like 53 inches or something like that. I walked right over to Fleet Pride and got a drive shaft made for $250. No complaints. I mean, I think, oh man, my fans, I have 2 Spall 10-inch brushless fans. I got them for $680 for the fans. The harnesses were about an extra $40 for each fan, so it's about $800 in fans. Don't ask me about it. I know I'm blowing through this, but if anyone has questions about this build or this setup or how you do it or anything like that, ask me. I have no problems answering it. But realistically, if you want to do this swap, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of custom work. It's a lot of late nights. You can get it done, like Monster Motoring in them. They did theirs very quickly. So it's something that's definitely going to take you a lot of time. It is very costly just because with rotary stuff, you can't find this stuff brand new all the time. Most of these parts that are made by a guy who has a day job and somehow has a CNC machine in his basement and cuts all these parts. Other than that, it's a pretty sick setup for what I have here. Like I said, it is pretty costly. I would have to estimate if you were going to do this swap yourself, or even if you were going to pay someone, I would honestly budget probably, like for like a setup like mine, I'd probably budget somewhere around the $25,000 and up, if anything, honestly. I thought I'd make a quick video. I know I blew through this pretty quickly, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I will definitely help you, point you in the right direction. And yeah, so if you enjoyed the video, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.